Move into picks and bans for game number 1. And immediately off the bat, they're going to start off with the Odin. It's pretty easy to determine what the Dragons are going to bring because they've been bringing very similar drafts the last few weeks. It's much more difficult to predict the Scarabs down to a note.
Well, you say that, but at the same time, Gore, I do think that the Jade Dragons are certainly, just like we gave that credibility towards Scream, having that familiarity up against the likes of Hurrywin, same could be applied from Hurrywin's direction towards Scream. It works both ways for what it's worth, but Jade Dragons, I think they're just going to take more of a focus against some of the aggressive picks that the Solar Scarabs have tended to revolve around. That Robin being taken away, I think that's a big shout out against Scream for the Jade Dragons bans. Hercules, of course, I think shots being fired in towards inbounds direction.
Yes.
And Odin, Sol, I think that those are just flexible components that the Solar Scarabs don't want to try and deal with.
The thing that's kind of catching my eye, Gilgamesh, Morgan Le Fay, Tiamat, kind of the big conversation.
Yes.
Yamoja right now as well, at maybe the top 4, the big bads. Some of them are getting through.
Well, this might actually work against the Solar Scarabs if you really think about it, Gore, because if Gilgamesh, Fenrir, Morgan Le Fay, and
Taka, that's too many names.
are all left up
They're
for
too
grabs,
good.
Solar Scarabs, they're only going to get one at best. And we've seen the Scarabs have a tendency to kind of revolve around that Fenrir to the same extent as the Jade Dragons. They love that pick as like a flexibility option, and with the Yamoja being banned, it's really up to the Jade Dragons to make the decision between whether or not they want to take away that Tiamat for Baronic or just leave it up for grabs and bank on snagging Morgan Le Fay for themselves.
And it's always that conversation when it comes down to that. Yamoja being one of the biggest picks. The Scarabs have won, I believe, only one game out of their 8 with this Yamoja, so it's not necessarily been kind of that makes sense that if they're going to get rid of any of those, they're going to get rid of the one that has not been treating them very nicely and instead try to force, like you had said, Bobby into an interesting position inbound with the Ymir and the Hercules bans, especially after that Hercules performance last week. But they get Baronic, this Tiamat, which has looked good for him in the past, but he looked great in losing sets last week as well on Morgan Le Fay. It's not always just how well he can perform.
But the Jade Dragons knew what they were going to be sacrificing here, Gore, and I think that this did become a pick your poison ordeal from the get-go when they saw the Solar Scarabs prioritizing the Odin and Soul bans in advance. So, again, Morgan Le Fay, Fafnir is going to be actually the initial response pick, and I like the Fafnir because it does leave things relatively open-ended here for the Jade Dragons in terms of whether they want to go for more of a shred-based objective composition or if they're just going to prioritize just trying to get all of their burst damage online. The Artemis lock-in, a nice security feature in terms of team fight.
Well, right now it feels like they're running the tier list, right? I mean, they grabbed the most wanted hunter, the most wanted support as of right now. That's going to be a very solid dual lane. But Tiamat Gilgamesh, we had done this, it's probably changed since then, but I think it was on Faxit Gaming, not this last episode, but the week before. These two were at the very top of the win rate as it came through for all gods. Granted, 50 games or something for each of them, not necessarily a wide god pool. And the Terra as well, who's been on the up and up here for the Scarabs. This is an interesting draft coming. I mean, frontline forward, Gilgamesh more than likely going into the jungle, Terra as well for inbound. But the Dragons just keep answering back with top-tier picks.
It was wise, the Dragons, too, to prioritize that Fafnir Artemis the more I think about it, Gore, because when you see Tiamat, the Solar Scarabs aren't going to be flexing that towards solo lane, so it's not as if the Jade Dragons were under any pressure to lock in Morgan Le Fay immediately, so by solidifying their duo lane first, they kind of put the pressure back into the Scarabs' court, because Scarabs, they get Gilgamesh, they get Terra, but now they still have to choose how they're going to prioritize the addition towards that dual lane. And as far as Hunter matchups are concerned, Rom does come to mind here, but Rom maybe not necessarily the greatest 1v1 matchup for the Artemis, but he can have that mid to late game influence in terms of just objective shred as well as just team fight shred, and it's something that I think Stuart would be comfortable with. And there's also the Heimdallr that we've been seeing Stuart tend to fall back on whenever he's in these Artemis matchups. I believe the Valkyries, he actually ran that up against Emilito, didn't go in his favor necessarily, but it was still an interesting showing from him, and I think that Heim could be a solid addition just because it does provide a little bit of survivability.
Well, solo lane was the name of the game for the bans. Vamana, Guan Yu, Kukulkan, Osiris to an extent, although we've been seeing way more jungle Osiris lately than solo, but that flexibility, I'll throw him under the barrel for solo lane for this one. But the Nike that gets locked in here, as much as that immediately for most people that screams like, okay, cool, solo laner, it's a warrior, The highlights we watched was Sam playing Nike.
At Sam all day long. I would be very surprised to see Fino K rocking the Nike solo. Fino, especially lately, Gore, he's been taking these really aggressive solo lane picks so that he could try and be as involved at the team fights as early on as possible. And I've really been liking that switch up in his gameplay performances alongside the Jade Dragons. I think it's definitely helped Hurry Win and Polar Bear Mike with alleviating some of that pressure in the mid-jungle team fight areas when you have a solo lane that's willing to make those impactful rotations early on. As far as Solar Scarabs are concerned, though, it seems Stuart feels more comfortable with the ROM this go around. And like I mentioned, ROM, I think, decent lane clear potential. The buff confirm could be a little bit more questionable here. Right now, I would definitely allude more towards the fact that the Jade Dragons are going to be looking for a lot of buff invade potential. They have an extremely aggressive early to mid game composition, especially with that Artemis Fafnir online.
Well, I was going to say someone we don't see too often in Camazotz, but we just saw him yesterday. The Dragons beat that Camazotz as well. We'll see if they're able to kind of do it here. But the ROM, you had kind of mentioned just the matchup against the Artemis. But I'm curious now with ROM, who can snipe from pretty deep in the backline and get those shots deep. Camazotz, who can dive pretty hard.
Not quite 8 yet, but 4 Benevolence on the board.
It's a good item, J-Mac. Gold spooling is so hard to argue against, and historically has been one of the best stats in the game. I mean, Midas Boots way back when, OG Sentinel's Gift, they're both items that had to have their gold spooling removed, and, well, Benevolence has it. You're probably going to see it in the SBL.
Man, that's a throwback onto the Midas Boots, back to some old Season 1 days of Smite. I remember picking up that on my my Bacchus support, which was the OG back at the time too, but we're well beyond those times as far as the gods and the boots. Boots now gone, but into the duo lane we go. You know, kind of interesting to talk about the support with PBM onto that one. 20 more kills, 100 more assists. He may have had a few more games than some of the other teams to pick that up here, but see how he can perform with that coming into this game.
Coming straight into the SPL, not having a lot of time to practice with his team, it is going to take a little bit for him to fit in, but I think he's going to bring a good deal of leadership as well. I mean, even Bobby alluded to that in his interview, saying that he's one of the most experienced players they've ever had.
Oh, Hurry went under fire into the mid lane, and Scream will be the one who strikes first for the Scares, putting them onto the board, but it might get a return kill for Sam over in that solo lane.
This is a traditionally European pace. It's Solar Scarabs and Jade Dragons, just playing a much different style than what I'm used to seeing from either one of these teams. Both squads generally like to play aggressive, but it is inbound, putting a little bit of pressure on the map. Thought maybe we'd be looking towards the neutral objectives or a red buff steal, but maybe stepping too far forward.
Yeah, it looks like inbound maybe takes a little bit more damage than he was expecting, but they're looking for a group up around this red buff. Transformation out of Mike. Red buff started up, but no full commit to it. Instead, it's going to be Sam who leaps in first, gets the bear to throw him against the wall, drops the rend as well. Red buff dropped, and inbound getting low. He's the one caught out here. Scream forced into the bat out of hell and leaves inbound behind, but he may not be the only one falling down. Sam for Soccer goes in onto Stewart with no mobility available for him. Sam will take him down.
Baronic, the last one standing. Well, Scream as well, but Baronic the only one being looked at, and well, not looked at for too long. Sam for Soccer picks up his second kill of this engagement, and it all starts off with the Solar Scarabs getting a little over-aggressive on the red buff. Instead, I think now is the time for the Solar Scarabs to continually try and find that pressure. I don't want to see them get deterred by getting pushed off that red buff. Instead, they've got decent pressure around this long lane. Start looking at the gold.
Well, inbound gets a nice purple steal and is forced to use the ultimate in response to Caledonian Boar, and Sam has rotated over as well. Leaps down right on top, and one more basic will do the job. A nice steal by inbound, but unfortunately he loses his life and his ultimate for it.
They are successful in stealing that camp, but with so many members allocated to the left-hand side of the map, Jade Dragons respond in kind to take out a much more good objective.
Stewart up into the sky, and Panda Cat's got nowhere to run. Inbound is just playing the zone for him and gets a nice route to set up for Stewart to get the final snipe necessary. Takes down Panda Cat for his first death.
Man, Panda Cat just trying to pick up that Draugr, gets caught out. Stewart shoots him through the wall, and unfortunate timing for the Dragons. That's right when purple buff spawns.
Final Code gets an ult onto Solar Troll. 3 levels up onto him. Sam rotates over as well. Solar Troll not going to be making out of this one, you would imagine. A nice leap, though. Gets him over the wall and the blink. Puts on the juke boots and gets away from him.
Sam for Soccer a little bit too early on his leap, trying to predict where SOT is going to go, and unfortunately for him was not correct.
Now he's going to run into Scream. Sam's got the ultimate for a little bit of health on that shield, but not quite enough. Bat out of hell gets the leap out of Sam, but the swipe on the final shot will do it. Scream Picks up one, sits on the blood pool to try and heal up, but he is healing fine okay in the process, and Hurrywin will be the one to come over and clean up the kill.
Nice rotation from Hurrywin. Surprising that Baronic gets out-rotated to his own side of the map, but Hurrywin unsafe.
Yeah, he's immediately going to get caught by Inbound and Baronic, but he's going to turn it right back on them. Gets some nice damage with the ultimate and drops Baronic down to half health.
Yeah, I thought for sure the Scarabs had him routed there, but instead Hurrywin does it on his own, turns the tables, and Baronic, now at half HP, forced to sit inside of his own tower.
Inbound here, and it's already been burned. Polar Bear Mike was able to leap over and disarm more than enough to take it down. Hammer going to be just off the marks. Inbound can dash away, but Jade Dragons are setting up for the Gold Fury. They've got the vision control on it. Yet again, they've been very ample on making sure that they can have the full control on that one. Inbound drops the wall as Sam leaps in, goes for the Ren. Scream's going to drop onto Sam for Soccer. Is going to get the ultimate out of him immediately, but the rest of his team is too far away to give him the same support that he needs. Wins have been dropped down. Scream picks up the double kill onto Hurrywin. Almost gets the third, but Solar Troll's the one who gets the final shot onto it. A four-man swing so far. Only Fine OK left for the Jade Dragons. Meanwhile, everyone on the Scarabs still living.
Look, I think the Scarabs might even have a play to head over towards Fire Giant. They're a little bit low HP, but they have sustain from Inbound if they could just get rid of this final obstacle inside of Fine OK. And that whole fight goes south for the Dragons when Sam for Soccer decides that he thinks he's a little bit tankier than he is. Has that secondary HP bar, but not enough to survive 5 members of the Scarabs.
Maybe a delayed deicide here if they can get Fine OK, but no, he'll be able to make it out. Nobody wanting to fully commit onto the tanky solo laner. Instead, they'll let him live in level 20 and immediately upgrades his axe to the Sundering Axe. So that'll be our first kind of difference amongst the last few games that we've seen. Like we were talking about, you know, between the desk and the games yesterday, it's been pretty much all Benevolence and Mannequin, but this axe picked up by Final K and now fully upgraded onto it. He's going to try and do something here at this Primal Fury. PBM walks forward, gets a stun on the Inbound, loses well over half of his health, and Inbound's going to be the first one out of the fight, and throw Scream into that picture too as Hurrywin picks up another one, and Pandacap finds SOT. Panda avoids the last snipe by Stewart. Stewart's trying to find him behind the wall, but Final K goes back to play defense for his carry, but Baronic doesn't have any defense for himself. 2 members of the Dragons team up and take him down for a quick deicide for the Dragons.
What an inverse, right? That's the exact opposite of what we saw last time around a Gold Fury fight. Inbound holds on to the objective a little bit too long, eats a max range Dragon Flight from Hurrywin as well. Have a lot of items this deep into the match, and that's exactly how it pans out. 5 for 0 around the Gold Fury, and now Fire Giant being looked at as well.
Now, one big team fight swings the way of the Dragons.
I don't think the Jade Dragons even necessarily need to take a Phoenix here. All they need to do is expose these birds, and they're going to prime themselves so well to look towards subsequent Fire Giants or even the Pyromancer.
Yeah, they're looking at over 5,000 gold across the map in just the towers. The first one does go down, and now pushes their lead to 2,000. Tier 2 goes down as well, straight to the Phoenix and the transformation for PBM. He's going to drop the Coerce and immediately stop pumping those autos into the bird, and there's no chance for it to live. There's just too much damage out of the carry. Inbound gets stunned out and shredded immediately. That's Sunder putting in major work for them. Stewart stunned out by the boar. Baronic on full retreat as well. Hurrywin goes into the ult and starts chunking through the health bar of Stewart, but with the Phoenix and their support down, the Scarabs defense is not going to last long.
Man, was Inbound's Magi's even up there? It looked like he got CC'd and just died immediately. Does hit a 5-man Earther and Fury, but nobody from the Scarabs in range to defend. I think the Scarabs were along the same thought process as I was. They thought maybe the Jade Dragons were just going to clear out all the towers, go get the neutral objectives as well, but the second the Dragons realized the Scarabs were not grouped up inside the Phoenix, there's no reason for them to not go for it.
Sam in the back looking for Stewart. Final K as well. Going to get the Aegis out of him. Ults to try and grab 2, but there's no one being picked up. Baronic turns it around and takes down Final K. The Tier 2 tower, however, is the main target of the Dragons. All that zoning is going to be able to net them at least the 1,500 gold from that.
Engagements, clearly.
Well, Fire Giant still has about a minute before it's going to respawn, and the Jade Dragons are already setting up for the fight around that side. Inbound does have his bubble back online. You can see that Final K's built one as well. PBM, he's just going to leap forward looking for anybody. Spots out Scream, but not going to land that hammer onto anyone. Inbound able to sneak away from that one, and maybe they're not even worried about the Fire Giant just yet. They still got one more Tier 2 on the map that they can shred away, and it looks like that'll be their prime target for it. Course goes through onto the carry, tower down under half health, and not much that the Scarabs can do about it. It's just going to fall.
Inbound took like a portion of Hurrywin's first ability there and lost out on 10% of his HP bar. That does not bode well. This man is got to be choosy with his engagements. As far as I'm concerned, Inbound has one duty, and it's to get Earthern Fury onto as many people as possible, allies and enemies alike, and likely going to die pretty quickly after that. But the damage output should be good thanks to that Spear of Deso.
Now Wildfire hits as well. Up into the sky goes Stewart looking for snipes, but everybody's fairly healthy. Aegis comes out from Hurrywin to immune some of the damage. Scream's ultimate not going to find anything, but Baronic able to find Panda Cat in the midst of it. Scream in the back line with Baronic, but Baronic not tanky enough. Hurrywin going to take him down. Stewart now with no Aegis. Beats just now expended to try and live through. Now he gets the Aegis up, but it's only to delay the inevitable. FineOK finds him. Scream looking for PBM, but he's going to get stunned up and taken down. PBM picks him up, and that's a 4-kill swing and maybe even the game here for the Dragons.
But the idea was great from the Scarabs. They wanted to spearhead their way into that engagement. I think maybe would have been benefited by waiting just a couple of seconds for the Jade Dragons to actually pull the Fire Giants and get that unofficial 6-man on their side. But instead, tries to take that fight, and the Jade Dragons, a little bit too quick on the reaction, were able to keep Hurrywin alive. And if Morgan Le Fay is surviving a team fight, that's likely a team fight you've won.
Yeah, it's going to be 8 seconds where Solar Troll comes up and only one man to defend against it. Titan down to half. Inbound doing everything that he can to buy some time. SOT just now respawns, but it might be too little, too late. However, the members are low, but not low enough. Game number 1 goes over to the Dragons 27 minutes in.
Play sort of circumstance, but as great of a performance as Scream was starting to have, unfortunately, I think the Jade Dragons just one-upped it a little bit further here, Gore. A lot of control, I think, especially coming through from that front line out of the Jade Dragons. San Francisco and FineOK working alongside each other just made it practically impossible, I think, for any of the carries out of the Solar Scarabs to really have any sort of room to function.
And just being able to create ample opportunities for it. You can see the knock-up, the CC chain. It was a lot to handle overall, to the point where there's, Inbound had a Magi's cloak that was there sometimes when he needed it, wasn't there sometimes when he needed it as well. So unfortunately for them, they just ended up being caught out. Lots of damage being done by Hurrywin in the backline. It just felt like a really good game for the carries on the Jade Dragons. And after a certain point, it was around this 20-minute mark, like right after that last fight, where things really just started to spiral more in control of the Dragons. And so they managed to walk out of this one, 6-2-9 there for Sam, 6-2-5 for Hurrywin. So very, very stellar games from them. What do you change, I guess, if you're going forward, either as the Dragons to make this faster for you, or as the Scarabs to not have it happen again?
Well, for the Dragons, I don't think there's really anything they should be looking to change. I think
the Scarabs in game number 2 here. Picks and Bans kicking it off. So last time it was Odin, Sol, and Yamoja for the Scarabs. Do you think they go mostly similar, or can they pivot those Odin and Sol picks out?
I think it would be worthwhile to consider banning away Fafnir if they're going to prioritize a front line, not Sol, that it's Yamoja that needs to be the priority, so to say, here for the Solar Scarabs. I think that they could definitely look at taking away Fafnir, definitely look at possibly taking away that Artemis as well. Posed a lot of issues, I think, just because of how consistent the team fight was, but the Odin, I can't really hate that in the slightest. I think that Jade Dragons have already sent a message to the league, FineOK specifically, with his Odin play last time we saw it. The Sol as well, though. The Sol is a little bit more particular here, though, Gore, because I understand, yes, Jade Dragons have definitely been running the Sol. They've had Hurrywin rocking that pick, but I just can't really justify it in comparison to the likes of a Morgan Le Fay, because in a sense there is a bit of a competitive tier list, I think, when it comes to mid laners. Tiamat's going to be sitting at the top of everything. After that, Morgan Le Fay is your next best bet, and then after that you can start having the considerations, I think, of the Souls, the Ryjins, and whatnot. But prioritizing Soul before everything else, you're giving the Jade Dragons, again, the power play position now, where they can just stick to the same bans. They can forfeit the Tiamat, because clearly Tiamat isn't an issue for them to deal with, and they'll even go one step further. They'll take away that Gilgamesh, make things even more problematic for the Solar Scarabs to try and find those options for that early game kind of proactive play.
Because it feels kind of like a damned if you do, damned if you don't here, right? Like we saw the Tiamat locked in last game, showcasing that, yes, just because Tiamat is in your game and just because it gets to a late game state doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be enough to win. Baranic's going to run that back. Whereas, I mean, you pick that Tiamat, it's not a guaranteed win. You let it through to Heroin, that's not going to be good for you.
and that's the other part of it, too. It's the other catch is that at least if you choose to prioritize banning the Morgan Le Fay over the Soul, you don't have to automatically forfeit one or the other to the Jade Dragons. I think that is a big problem here for the Solar Scarabs is that, yes, you get Tiamat, yes, that's awesome, but at the same time, the Jade Dragons are always going to have that opportunity to respond. Interesting, though, to see Dragons straight away from the Fafnir. Seems as though they want to try and hedge their chances a little bit more around prioritizing that Morgan Le Fay early on, just in case the Solar Scarabs might have had those considerations towards trying to take both for themselves.
Like you had highlighted earlier, it's notable the only thing that changed in the bans was the Gilgamesh there instead of Ymir, and now this Morgan Le Fay jumps up a little bit. Mike likes Ymir. Maybe they're trying to figure out a way to fit that in, or maybe, as you had kind of highlighted, they're trying to figure a way to get the Scarabs into a more compromising position where they can maybe levy the picks against them a little harder. Osiris, someone that was very important, wasn't banned until the very final ban by the Scarabs last game and has been first pick in some of the games we've seen over the last couple of weeks. And so he's being hovered over. Is he something, I mean, Scream could pick him up for the jungle. You could also technically have Sot take him in there, but in comparison, trying to chase down Artemis and Morgan Le Fay, how does that work?
If they do take Osiris, I really can't fault the pick because Osiris definitely strong in this current meta. The concern now becomes what kind of assisting pieces are the Solar Scarabs, because I would like to see the crowd control. That seemed to be their main issue in game number 1, was that they just did not have those consistency factors for reinitiation. They could jump in, but then they didn't really have peel, then they didn't really have anything kind of left over to actually try and deal with a lot of the pressure that the Jade Dragons had in terms of their counter initiation. But with the Hachiman being locked in, Solar Scarabs, they've definitely done a great job, I think, at prioritizing a very solid backline and just this ultimate carry shred kind of component. But Ymir does become an interesting topic of discussion here for the Jade Dragons because Ymir is relatively solid at shutting down the likes of these hunters that don't really have those consistent escapes. And Hachiman, I think, maybe, I don't want to say it's the Solar Scarabs falling into the Jade Dragons trap, Gore, but as far as the drafts are concerned, on the top end, I think the Jade Dragons have definitely gone one step ahead of the Solar Scarabs here.
And you called it, and they locked it in immediately. I'm going to tell you now, nothing feels better. That's like my favorite feeling in the world when you're like, man, I'd really like blank here, and they agree. It always works out, but the Ymir locked in, and now they're in a position to ban out the supports they don't want to deal with, making it even easier for the Dragons.
And that's what I was waiting for, was the Fafnir ban to come through from the Jade Dragons immediately. When you see Osiris and Hachiman, next thing you know, you might as well take away that Draconic form for the Coerce boost, and I don't think that the Jade Dragons would opt to ban away the Terra because as it currently stands, I feel as though the Jade Dragons top 3 can definitely dunk on a Terra if she tries to be inbound fall 2. But again, I think the primary concern now for the Solar Scarabs becomes, okay, what kind of tools can we utilize to prevent ourselves from all getting corralled inside of these Ymir walls? Because the jungle fight, I think, definitely a little bit more in the Jade Dragons' favor because they have the Caledonian Boar alongside of this Ymir, and it's a very strong dual lane presence in general throughout the laning phase.
Well, it was the Fafnir-Fenrir combo banned by the Dragons. Cucullin, so the top 4 bans for the Scarabs, the exact same. The Odin Soul, Yamoja, Cucullin joins that list. And only fine okay would this ever occur, but Baron Samedi banned out by the Scarabs here. We've seen him like once a couple of weeks ago, hasn't come through a whole ton. And then they lock in this Erlang Shin, again, another god that was in the highlight reel for Sam.
Baron is relatively strong, though, at dealing with those Cyrus, so that might have been, I think, Scream maybe giving his team the heads-up play of, hey, guys, if we're going to take this pick, we should definitely look to ban away one of the better options that FinoK has displayed in the past that he likes to lean towards. But the Susano is an interesting last pick here because it does provide, I think, a little bit of that crowd control factor that I was definitely asking for. The Shinten as well, when paired alongside the Susano, I think it's going to be much better suited for the Solar Scarabs here in terms of just reliable utility burn, in terms of pulling those purification beads away from the carries, making Panican and Hurrywin maybe feel a little bit more pressure, so to say, because there's a lot of dive, there's a lot of ways, I think, for the Solar Scarabs to effectively force themselves into the backline from the Jade Dragons. And Susanoo, Xingtian, Osiris, all gods, even the Tiamat to a certain extent, all gods that can get around that Amir wall. It's really just Stuart on this Hachiman that I think he's going to have to be very mindful of his positioning with.
And the first game this year for Bologna. We've been talking a lot about her, especially after Season 8. There was a little...
That would have been. I should have looked that up before coming into it, but anyways, we move into it. Bologna, in general, you know, like they said, we kind of talked about over on the desk how she got a buff to the Eagles rally, and then she still didn't see any play. Why out of kind of left field here do we just suddenly see, oh, you know, Bologna looks nice here?
Final K likes to bring some variety to Smite, or maybe it's this solo potential. SOT goes down, steps up a little bit too far, and maybe sleeps on the damage output that Bologna has. And it is pretty decent, J-Mac. When you hit the circular piece of the bludgeon, makes you hit pretty hard.
Yeah, and the slam following it, a nice little pin onto Scream as Sam for Soccer surges forward. Hurrywin throwing out the wildfire onto Baronic, getting a little bit of extra damage. But yeah, I mean, when you don't play against a Bologna for a year plus, you sometimes forget just how much damage you can do. And with that Tier 2 Fighter's Mask on there, Final K able to pick up first blood onto Solar Troll. I think it's the second time he's fallen first now in that solo lane.
That's pretty nice, and he's already got the Jotun's Wrath available to him. He has his whole build ahead of him. Could elect to go for a slightly bruiser build, or maybe that one-shot potential Susanoo as well, but can likely expect him to get involved very soon here.
Hurrywin has to go up into the ultimate, trying to live through, but it's not going to be enough. Yet again, Scream will strike first for the Scarabs, though not first blood this time around, but making sure to get himself on the board early.
Dragons can put their wards elsewhere and get additional safety for either side lane. Panda Cat can save a little bit of gold, not having to ward it out.
Hurrywin under fire yet again, goes up into the ult to immune the knockup from the Typhoon, and will return some damage back to inbound. Keep himself fairly healthy off of it. Ultimate expended out of Scream, and Final K up a pretty good chunk here onto Solar Troll as far as the experience go, and does a nice little chunk of health to him as well. Minion comes out from Baronic onto Hurrywin, who doesn't have his ultimate, dealing with Stewart. Meanwhile, inbound gets a throw into Sam for Soccer into the tower, but he gets a nice heal from the ult, but he just has no way out. The wall from Mike not going to be enough, and neither is the ult to clean up Baronic. Solar Troll rotates over. Hurrywin never went back to the lane, or never went back to base, I should say. And PBM may fall here, stun out of Solar Troll from the tether, diving to the tower. Lord,
nice.
The Afterlife over the freeze, and he will find him with a fadeaway tether. But meanwhile, Final K on the rotation at least picks up one.
He's looking to take some more. Bludgeon gets canceled out. That likely would have put just about anyone down there with a triple proc, but Solar Scarabs happy with how that engagement goes. Huge swing for them. Aren't going to stick around and chase out Final K.
Try and save Sam after they saved my life, but Hurrywin never going back there, never got his health pool back up, and so also you don't get your beads back up just by going to the base side. You got to wait for that timer, and losing out on them and the ultimate means he doesn't really have any safety, doesn't really have any defense onto it. And now we look at Scream here up 2-0-1 on the Susanoo, about a level and a half up over Sam for Soccer as well. Sam not able to keep up in that farm, or maybe it's just Scream doing really well across the map, especially in this mid lane.
Panda Cat trying to rotate on inbound here, but it's Final K in first.
Ultimate out of inbound, and Final K and Scream as well expends the Typhoon for a defense onto that one just to get inbound out.
Yeah, Typhoon lost. You better believe the Jade Dragons make note of that. Gold Fury now under pressure, and without that huge team fight tool from the Scarabs, they're just going to let this one go. I mean, yeah, you got your boy out alive, but you lost your ability to defend the neutral objectives inside a mid on his own, which means that we had a 4 versus 3 on the left-hand side. Scarabs don't want to take that. Or a 1 versus 2. Well, the Scarabs didn't want to take that one either, which means the Jade Dragons just went out cleanly.
PBM's going to get a nice stun on the inbound just because that bubble is down. The pin to follow up from Sam for Soccer, and right to the Pyromancer they will go to try and drop this objective down for themselves. Wall from PBM. Going to try and do a little bit of zoning. Typhoon charged up and thrown out, but the Dragons are going to be the ones who secure the Pyromancer. SOT still running forward.
Nice.
Sam under fire, very low, gets into the turtle form, but will get a nice little heal just the back end of it, but not enough to save his life. Baronic takes him down. PBM goes for the ult just to try and save his life, but the wall even better at doing so. Scream ports in with the jet stream, but gets frozen immediately at the tower line. PBM trying to stay alive. Final K's ult's not going to save his life. That's 2 down just for the Pyromancer.
Meanwhile, on the other side of the map, Panda Cat didn't really feel like rotating. Instead, takes out a tier 2 tower. And what a phenomenal wall that was from PBM, blocking off 4 members of the Solar Scarabs. Does not really net him too much there. It does still cost him his life, but does buy a fair deal of time for the rest of his team. Hurrywin was able to rotate back all the way around, get re-involved in the fight. Final K survives, but this is exactly what the Scarabs need. They need to find some sort of gold stimulus for their team.
But Final K is not going to let them get it for free. Immediately runs into the back, goes for the disarm. Scarabs get the Primal Fury, but Final K unrelenting, chasing down the jungler. Scream is trying to get away, but SOT didn't have that same luxury, and Inbound might not either, as Panda Cat spotted him out, slows him down in it all, and look how deep Final K is going for this kill. Finds Scream in the base at the Phoenix line, diving past the tier 2, past that Phoenix into the base.
Trusted his team to win the team fight in the back line, and, well, they did. Jade Dragons take out both SOT and Inbound without the help of Final K, as he was on his infinite crusade to chase out Scream. Does eventually find that kill as well, and now it's all up to Hurrywin to distract the 2 members of the Scarabs, while the rest of the boys look at the most important objective on the map.
Yeah, they're going to get that Fire Giant seemingly fairly free. 3 members still pushing down against it. Fire Giant will fall, and all the while, Hurrywin still gets out, so he didn't have even the tier 2 in mid and solo lane. You can see the team splitting up to start that out when we say that, but now Sam Sucker is sticking around there. Every time I look over, he's doing something different, but he'll split up to try and take that tier 2 by himself, while the rest of the Dragons look towards the one in mid, and not just splitting the map, but splitting the team as well. The Scarabs split up there 4 or 5 strong. Scream goes in first with the ultimate, hits a couple, but Hurrywin strikes back hard and fast. Scream is already down. Stewart off the horse, barely gets to live for the time being, but Solar Troll stuck in the middle of 3. He's a little worse for wear, and Final K still diving towards the Phoenix line, holds Veronic back, turns around, takes out Solar Troll, and leaves only 2 members of the Scarabs left to defend.
The Scarabs all in commit, which is something we see a lot of teams do on defense, especially around Phoenixes, but they do it on the tier 2 and lose the game off of it.
And Final K gets a nice little ult into the mid, still holding on to that one all the while. Veronic trapped inside the fountain, and the Titan trapped with no help against the 5 dragons. The former Dragon Slayers are the ones who end up falling this time around. Solar Scarabs not quite as lucky this game.
And ever taking off, the Dragons were not looking to add to the L columns with their debut against the Scarabs here today. Scream, while he had his attempts, had his moments, I just don't think the Solar Scarabs have had enough time to really develop this new roster for the likes of the Jade Dragons.
Yeah, and this is something, I mean, the Scarabs, like you can see here, early on, outside of the first blood, actually were able to find a good couple of kills and a pretty decent gold going in their favor. But then it just started to fall away from them, ultimately having the kill lead for a majority of the game. But the gold lead kind of speaks wonders more than anything throughout a lot of it. And like you said, this is actually, I would argue, having a performance where you're doing pretty decently against the Dragons with 2 roster swaps. Like Stewart did play last week, but now you're bringing in a new jungler. That's pretty solid. Tomorrow they're going to be playing the Leviathan, so we'll get to even talk more about it then. But we're also going to have to crack this over the next couple of weeks because it definitely feels like it has a lot of promise. Not enough promise to beat the Dragons this time around, but enough promise to give them at least a little bit of trouble.
And Final K certainly had himself a time with that Bologna solo. He started off hot with the solo kill in the lane and phase, and after the laning phase ended, it just seemed as though that team fight transition was not a problem whatsoever there for Final K and the rest of the Jade Dragons. They just really were concise and very consistent with just how they chose to follow up nonstop. Still just buying Benevolence.
Well, then maybe when Benevolence gets nerfed, does War Flag rise up?
No. I still think that item is just, well, there's a tier list, and
it's not
War
not very
Flag
high
is
up.
the neglected stepchild that no one will ever address.
There's a tier list. It's not even allowed to be on the tier list. It's separate for now. Well, there you can see the standings. The Dragons jumping up towards the top, fighting the Kings, who are going to be playing tomorrow. I mean, realistically, right now, it feels like the Leviathans, the Kings, and the Dragons fighting for second place, whereas the Bolts are going to continue fighting to maintain not just first place, but an undefeated streak.